Originally released in 2001 as a launch title for the GameCube, Rogue Squadron Rogue Leader, or simply Rogue Squadron II, is an arcade-style aerial shooter. It's the sequel to the critically acclaimed Rogue Squadron for the N64, and it's the second game in the Rogue Squadron trilogy. I'll admit, while having played the original Rogue Squadron, I never played the sequel back when it launched. I didn't even own a GameCube at the time, so going into this review I had no nostalgic memories or pre-existing biases towards it, which can either be a blessing or a curse when playing old games for the first time. At the time of its launch, it was a hugely successful game, and it went on to be the 14th best-selling game on the GameCube. But 15 years later, does its gameplay and presentation hold up? For the most part, yes. Yeah, okay, so it doesn't come remotely close to the presentation standards set by the most recent Star Wars game, but in all the areas where it counts, Rogue Squadron delivers. It's actually kind of hard to believe this game is 15 years old. It looks and sounds great, and aside from the 4:3 aspect ratio and some dated game design, such as the menu system, it stands up pretty well.
Keep those fighters off my back. Copy that, boss. We're going after the fighters.
The story follows the events from the original film trilogy. It attempts to cover all the main battles starting with the attack on the original Death Star, and it culminates with the final battle from the end of Return of the Jedi. Each mission is bookended with some nice cutscenes, and these sequences really help set the tone along with telling you what you'll be actually doing. The game does a fantastic job overall at capturing the essence of the films. Even the opening logo cinematic hits the mark. In general, the game still looks and sounds impressive with nice lighting effects, detailed ship models, and some really top-notch voice acting. The inclusion of the original score, sound clips, and lots of dialogue from the film certainly helps elevate the presentation. If anything, in this department it makes much better use of the original source material than the 2015 Battlefront game.
All craft, prepare to jump into hyperspace on my mark.
All right, stand by.
May the Force be with us.
The scale of some of the battles is really impressive, with a huge number of enemies on the screen at once. The size and draw distance of the levels are also equally impressive. All the ships look great and have multiple view angles. The cockpit for each ship is unique, and they also integrate the HUD from the external views into the dash. It's much harder to play this way, but it does make for a much more immersive experience. The menus are about the only thing that looks really dated, but I guess that's to be expected from a game of this vintage. I also felt that the simplified theme music in these menus is slightly at odds with the rest of the orchestral score, but it's certainly not a deal breaker. There are 15 levels, not including the various unlockable secret stages, and unfortunately it's single player only. Missions are generally short and contain a couple of simple objectives. In this department, it's obvious how far game design has come in the last decade. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It allows people like myself with limited gaming opportunities to enjoy a few missions without needing a spare 3 hours. Most missions are pretty hard too and don't have checkpoints, so the brevity is actually a blessing. They often require pinpoint accuracy or the completion of objectives in a very short time frame. You'll also need to manage your squad, and this is particularly important with some of the more difficult missions. This is one of the areas I have beef with. Managing your squad is a bit fiddly due to the D-pad's location. You can assign your squad objectives by pressing one of the 4 directions. This makes giving orders during the often intense battles way more complicated than it should be. I also didn't find my squad particularly effective. Many times I'd tell them to attack an objective and I'd just see them flying around aimlessly. Another area which can be frustrating is it's sometimes unclear what you have to do or what the most efficient method for clearing a stage is. I guess that's part of what makes replaying missions so rewarding, but in many scenarios I only found out what I was supposed to be doing by blind luck. At the end of a stage, you're awarded a score for completing the mission. You earn points for meeting certain conditions as well, such as completing the mission in a certain time frame, and these points can be spent on unlocking secrets. There's a ton of secrets too, like stages, modes, and vehicles. The good news is you don't have to grind for them either if that's not your thing. Just about everything can be accessed via the password system, so be sure to check out those cheat forums if you're feeling lazy. Controls in general are good, although aiming is very twitchy and sensitive. It takes a while to get the hang of it, and in the early stages you'll be wildly shooting in all directions. It would have been nice to have some kind of sensitivity option in the menu, but as it is, aiming will take a fair amount of practice to master. The button configuration generally makes the best of the GameCube's bizarre button layout, and apart from the aforementioned D-pad location, all the other actions are well mapped.
Accelerate to attack speed. Draw the fire away from the cruisers.
Rogue Squadron II is still an enjoyable game. It suffers from some minor control issues and a few frustrating missions, but overall it's still an immensely enjoyable title. It's a great example of what games used to be like when the industry was simpler before developers and publishers started stripping out cool hidden content for DLC and microtransactions. If you own a GameCube, do yourself a favour and pick this one up.
Watch out! Squad at .06.